Yeah, thanks. Perfect. Great.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining, and thanks of course to our guests today for joining as well. Welcome to Carnegie Mellon for those of you dialing in, and welcome to our first ever Product Management Distinguished Lecture Series, and first of many, I'm sure. Today in the room, we have students from all over campus, the Product Management, the MS in Product Management, MBA, MHCI, Innovation Institute, probably some engineering students in here, I would imagine. We're really happy to bring everybody under the same umbrella for this discussion today, so we can be a bit stronger at product management as we move forward. That said, I'd like to introduce our guests today, and the way that this will work is Geoffrey Moore will give a small presentation with some slides, some food for discussion, and we will move into question and answer. For those in the room, I'll ask you to pass your note cards with questions up to me in this chair. And for those online, I'll be monitoring the Q&A. And that, forgive me for not introducing myself. For those online, for those who who I have not met yet, I'm Brad Eiben. I'm the Executive Director of the MS in Product Management program here at CMU. And today I'm thrilled to introduce our moderator for the discussion, Brian Nejmeh. Brian's the president of Instep Incorporated, a software technology advisory firm where he's an advisor, investor, and board member to startup and advanced stage software companies. Brian is also a senior operating partner with Peak Equity Partners, a software-focused private equity firm. Brian's focus over the past 25 years has been on building and scaling enterprise software companies, leveraging his core competencies in software product development, product management, and technology leadership. And very relevant today, Brian's also an integral part of our MS and Product Management program and the environment that we're creating here at CMU. Brian is an instructor, a capstone advisor, and has been involved in many of the behind-the-scenes activities that are positively impacting the student experience, including today's presentation. So thank you, Brian. Now, Geoffrey Moore is an author, speaker, and advisor who splits consulting time between startup companies in the Wildcat Venture Partners portfolios and established high-tech enterprises. Most recently, including Salesforce, Microsoft, Autodesk, F5 Networks, Gainsight, Google, and Splunk. Moore's life's work has focused on the market dynamics surrounding disruptive innovations. His first book, Crossing the Chasm, focuses on the challenges startup companies face transitioning from early adopting to mainstream customers. It has sold more than 1 million copies, and its third edition has been revised such that the majority of its examples and case studies reference companies come to prominence in the past decade. Moore's 2015 work, Zone to Win, addresses the challenge large enterprises face when embracing disruptive innovations, even when it's in their best interest to do so. It's time to stop explaining why they don't and start explaining how they can. This has been the basis of much of his recent consulting work. Irish by heritage, Moore has yet to meet a microphone he didn't like and gives between 50 and 80 speeches a year. One theme that has received a lot of attention recently is the transition in enterprise IT investment focus from systems of record to systems of engagement. This is driving the deployment of a new cloud infrastructure to complement the legacy client server stack, creating massive markets for next generation of tech industry leaders. Moore is a bachelor's in American literature from Stanford University and a PhD in English literature from the University of Washington. After teaching English for 4 years at Olivet College, he came back to the Bay Area with his wife and family and began a career in high tech as a training specialist. Over that time, he transitioned first into sales, then to marketing, finally finding his niche in marketing consulting, working first at Regis McKenna Incorporated, then with 3 firms he helped out, the Chasm Group, Chasm Institute, and TCG Advisors. Today, he's chairman emeritus of all 3. Please join me in welcoming Geoffrey A. Moore.
Right, so I have 3 slides. But I kind of want wrong way. I want to tee this up. And I want to tee it up from a point of view of product management, because I think product management is going through a pretty dramatic restructuring. This is not your father's product or your mother's product management. It's a different discipline. I want to kind of talk about why and what are the implications of that. So that's where this is headed. Let me kind of tee this up by, my career spans 2 centuries. Basically 1980 to 2020, it's about half and half in the 2 centuries. Very different centuries when it came to technology. So when technology came to power in my early era, it was an industrial economy that we were taking globally. It was a world in which demand exceeded supply. Now, economists will tell you that's impossible. What that means, though, is that the world was hungry for more supply at a better price. And so product was king. And so we took technology and we focused it on the supply chain. So we were focused on manufacturing systems, on financial systems, on global commerce systems. It was a very business-oriented world. And the disciplines of that era were things like Six Sigma quality. How can we take cost out of the supply chain? How can we take latency out of the supply chain? How can we just-in-time manufacturing, on-demand inventory, all those kinds of ideas. And the internet changed everything, because prior to that, you basically had a fax-oriented economy where you couldn't really track goods very effectively. The internet allowed us to bring China into the global economy. It allowed us to bring India into the global economy. Which meant globalization became at scale and powerful, which had a dramatic impact on price and availability, which was hugely beneficial to consumers, very disruptive to the developed societies who had very different price points. And so it had created a bunch of social issues that we're frankly still working through in terms of what happens to the middle class when a globalized economy hits the world. There was a world of B2B. There was a little bit of B2C, but not much. And basically, it was computers that you brought home from work and then maybe played games on, something like that. And the emphasis is on what we ended up calling systems of record. So these are all relational database systems, starting with the financial system, the transaction systems. We got eventually into customer relationship management systems, but they weren't really about customers. They were about sales programs. And it was all about managing your internal stuff better and more efficiently. And it was a thing where everything was sold on a license and maintenance model. There was no subscriptions. There was not the as a service thing was not a service. Was a professional service that was a project. It was never consumed as a service. So it was a license and maintenance model, which caused you to focus very heavily on a product that would get adopted and bought, and then after that, that's the customer's problem. Did they get value out of it? I don't know. It's their problem. So that was the world we were playing in. And by the way, the customers knew that. I mean, it wasn't like we weren't tricking anybody, but that was just the way it was. And so customer support was really product support. I will make sure the product works. After that, it's up to you to get value from it. This was an era where SAP, Oracle, Cisco, Microsoft, Intel, this is when they rose to power, the whole client-server global value chain. It's an amazing accomplishment. Had a huge impact on the global economy. That said, right around the turn of the century, because there was a thing called the Y2K bug, and people were worried about would all the systems go down. So everybody bought a huge amount of software in 1999 to protect against the Y2K bug. But what that had the effect of doing is pulling forward about 3 years worth of purchasing. So it created a massive divot on the other side of the year 2000, which we called the tech bubble bursting. Okay? When that happened, all of a sudden, consumer community came in. You'll see this with the next slide. But in the meantime, what happened was the emphasis on B2B was like, we went to a buffet, we ate all we could eat, and then we ate some more. So we're not going to eat for a while. So enterprise computing kind of went down, but in its wake came consumer computing. So what had happened from a global economy point of view is now we had more supply than demand, meaning there was enough cheap product in the environment that not necessarily cheap, at any price point, there was enough product in the environment. So that now it wasn't the product that was the scarce ingredient, it was the customer. So the customer became the scarce ingredient. Now all of a sudden we're saying, by the way, if you work at any company right now, they will go out of their way to say we're customer centric, right? Because that's the new game. And therefore, instead of Six Sigma, which was kind of the real discipline of choice in the 90s, user experience design, for the same reason, becomes the discipline of choice now. Because we want to, in a digital world, maintaining your connection to the customer is critical, and it's fragile. It's very fragile. So, and what changed everything this time was cloud and mobile. So what cloud and mobile did is instead of connecting companies and enterprises, we're now connecting 2 billion, now 3 billion people out of 9 are connected via handheld devices and the cloud computing to each other, which means you have 24/7 access to a third of the world's population effectively for free. No business process was ever designed with that in mind. No product was ever designed with that in mind. All of a sudden this is why you guys got to help us out. So in this world, B2C is enabling B2B. So Facebook creates, by the way, in addition to a lot of problems, Facebook creates this massive fabric of communication that we can now leverage. But understand, we'll talk more about this in a second, that fabric was never designed as an enterprise fabric. It was designed as a consumer entertainment fabric and a media fabric. And there's a bunch of the product issues and user experience issues have to do with the fact that we're trying to use it for a set of use cases that it was never designed for. In particular with cybersecurity, it's created enormous problems, which you guys are going to have to figure out. We talk now about systems of engagement. So if a system of record is a way of keeping track of a product supply chain, a system of engagement is a way of maintaining connections with the customer and the other end of the supply chain, as it were. It's the same supply chain. It's just that instead of looking at it from back to front, we're now trying to look at it from front to back. Most of what you're learning in your classes right now, all the design thinking, human computer interaction stuff, it's all about, yes, start with the experience and work back to the product rather than start with the product and work forward to the experience. Eventually, you have to do both. I mean, if the product isn't interesting, this doesn't work. But it's just a different orientation. And the business model is now switched to much more of a subscription, annual recurring revenue model, which, by the way, the financial sector loves. Because one of the problems with the license and maintenance model is it's very lumpy. And every quarter, it's like, oh my God, are we going to make the quarter? In a subscription model, you go into the quarter with 93% of your revenue already there. So it's a different problem. And it also allows people, it gives much more power to the customer. Because now I can unsubscribe. Or more likely what I'll do is I will reduce my subscription. But either way is ruinous to the company who's supplying me the service. The service model only works if you continue to consume more and more and more going forward, because you don't get your money back until about the third year, typically. Somewhere in the second or third year is when you break even on a subscription model. So therefore, if for some reason, so you can't like ship the product and go, your problem. It's like, no, it's your problem. So that's why we switched from customer support to customer success. And that wasn't just putting lipstick on a pig. Customer success is a completely different discipline. Customer success starts with, what are you trying to do? What is the value you're trying to create with leveraging our product or service? And then how do we make sure we're in alignment with that so that you will keep on buying more going forward? So the customer support manager was a very technical person, very product-centric. The customer success manager is much more adoption-oriented, or usage-oriented, monthly active users, daily active users, that sort of thing. Salesforce, Amazon, Google, Apple, Netflix, another generation of leaders. Okay? Make sense? I mean, I think you guys are getting pretty good. Any questions on that one? Okay, big global thing. Let me talk about how that then translated into, I think, 5 sort of mini eras of technology deployment. The first of which was the systems of record. We talked about that. Big deal, client server ERP, focus on the supply chain, product is king. We take that for granted now, but that was an amazing accomplishment when it happened. Then we talked about the systems of consumption. Now, this was not B2B, this was pure B2C. This was the Facebook and the Google and the Yahoo and the YouTube, but it was essentially a media and entertainment and gaming play. But it got because of mobile, it got everybody into the game. So now all of us, and not only everybody, but all the time in the game. So I don't know if you look at stats about how often you look at your phone. You'll be appalled. Okay, but and you probably actually do it more than the stats because nobody ever reports what they actually do. Okay, but the point is, this is where we learned to focus on the consumer experience. Now, Jobs had been doing this earlier at Apple. The Macintosh was an early example of user experience computing, but this now became the dominant play. And particularly when we went to mobile, we had a whole new set of experiences that are coming into play. And then what happened was, the enterprises said, well, wait a minute. If we have 24/7 interactions with our customer base, with our partners, with anybody involved in our ecosystem, would we run business processes the way we do today? The answer is, of course not. Nowadays we say we have an app for that. But in the old days we said we have a form for that, right? You fill out a form, and that's how you play the game. Well, if you go from forms to apps, it's a different world. It's a completely different world. And so systems of engagement is all about this notion of how do you create service experiences, whether it's pre-sales, post-sales, whatever it is, but you're focusing on the customer experience. And analytics for customer experience is still in a developing art. You guys are going to invent better analytics for customer experience. Right now, they're very crude. And right now, they could lead to trouble. So Facebook, one of its key analytics for customer experience is clicks. When you find out with clicks, the way to get more clicks, show people stuff they hate or they love, and better yet, oscillate. Okay, so drive the people crazy, and they'll click like crazy. Okay, and that's basically. But that was a situation where that was a customer experience, right? It worked. They can manipulate you. You do this stuff. We do it. But it's not the customer's game. That's the advertiser's game. And it's you guys got to solve that problem. Okay. But systems of engagement was, we are now having enterprises saying, now we can design from the customer back because we get the signal. And the reason, and this is really important because it gets to systems of intelligence. The signals from systems of engagement are all in log files. They're buried among a mass amount of noise. So signal to noise ratio is an incredibly important idea for machine learning and artificial intelligence, because we say when we want data. Data is a dangerous word, and it's actually the wrong word. Data is the sum of signal plus noise. You don't want noise. And by the way, the signal is a absolutely minuscule fraction of the noise. Okay. So as a result, when you collect data, you're collecting noise. So you have to be much smarter about how I do that. And what the Google guy said at the beginning was, we can't detect the difference. So initially, we have to collect massive amounts of stuff. But with machine learning, we're getting better and better and better and better at filtering out the noise and detecting the signal. But signal is the critical idea here. Signal is what machine learning delivers. Artificial intelligence delivers interpretation of signals. It translates signals into state descriptions. Now I understand state, and now I'm trying to change state or maintain state, and I'm using signals, just the way your brain uses signals from your heart to maintain your heartbeat, whatever. And eventually it gets to your consciousness. You say, well, I better sit down, or I better have a, whatever. Okay. So systems of intelligence right now, really big deal right now. Working cloud-enabled predictive algorithms, because the cloud now gives us a place where we can collect all that noisy signal. And then the AI machine learning lets us extract the signal from the noise. And that's a data science problem. And so who's the person who came here? I think it was you. Were you telling me that you came here as a liberal arts person who wanted to learn technology? Somebody just said that to me. Okay, what's you? Okay, systems of intelligence. By the way, if it's too hard, just partner with it. You know, they don't know how, but you know how to do. You know, let's let them do their stuff. But we need to get the two. We need to get the peanut butter and the chocolate together to make the Reese's peanut butter cup, because we need the machine learning. But we also need the subtle understanding of customer experience, because otherwise you get signal with no interpretation, or you get interpretation with no signal. Okay? We need to get them together. So that's what systems of intelligence imply. But it's a human in the loop process, right? Human beings are in that loop. The last one is, no, they're not. Systems of autonomy these are processes that happen either too rapidly or at too large a scale for human beings to participate in them directly, to be in the loop. You'll actually create more problems than solutions. And I can remember, it wasn't that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, two authors from MIT were talking about the difference between human intelligence and machine intelligence. And they said, for example, a computer would never be able to drive a car. That was less than 15 years ago. So systems of autonomy is, oh yeah, we can. Now again, think about it, signals and interpretation is the key to that game. Is that a truck? Is that a kid? Is that a traffic light? What the heck is it? Smart cities, smart vehicles, et cetera. And of course, CMU in Stanford had that incredible autonomous car chase. I think it was like 15 years ago. I got to meet Sebastian. I'm out in the Stanford area, but I got to meet Sebastian who's from CMU around that. It was a lot of fun. Okay, why I put this up here? Because as you leave the campus and you go back into your companies, or if you work with an Infosys or a Tata or something, you work with many companies, we have enterprises at every stair in this staircase today. We have people, for example, on the bottom stair saying, I want to go from Oracle to Workday. You know, I want to go from Siebel to Salesforce. I want to have a new generation of systems of record in the SaaS model, born in the cloud, as opposed to forklifted into the cloud. Systems of consumption, you know, there I think the issue is going to be social. How do we socially manage our social media right now? Because it's controlling us, we're not controlling it. It's dangerous. Systems of engagement, you get most people right now, most enterprises are still trying to get their systems of engagement at a level where they feel like they're really powerful. Some people, I mean, like Amazon has just crushed it. And therefore Walgreens and Walmart and all those guys are trying to catch up. And by the way, it's true that Tesla is crushing it with, well, crushing might be a little, with their cars. And so General Motors and Ford and Mercedes and Porsche are trying to catch, I mean, every place you go. So in terms of the most employable of the 5 things right now, I think most budget right now is for systems of engagement, but the glamour job is systems of intelligence. And if you can persuade an employer that you can do this, you can write a pretty nice ticket, even if you're lying. No, I mean, I don't want to hurt anyone. but the point is, that's the really, really, really scarce resource right now. And in the past, if you were a machine learning expert, you would typically go to a tech company. Now it's no. It's every other company that wants you desperately because they have to compete against the tech disruptor in their sector. It's a huge, huge thing. Systems of autonomy, still early days. Where they work, they're really important. I think they're going to become more important, but I think it's not this decade. And this decade is systems of engagement, systems of intelligence. It's kind of where I think that most of the action is going to be. Now I want to do one last, does that make sense again? I mean, okay, I don't think I'm, yes, okay, good. All right, fair enough. Last slide, and this is the slide which is going to lead up to the Q&A because we're now done pontificating and now starting actually engaging. So implications for product management. I have 5 of these things I want you to think about. The first one we've talked about already, which is we're going to move from back to front to back, which means it used to be that the user interface was the last thing you designed, except for writing the manual. I mean, it was that bad. Now it's the other way around, right? Now it's actually, design, think about it, prototype. You design the experience and then work all the way back the other direction. It's easy to say that. It's really hard to do, particularly when you've got a big legacy back end that can't move very fast. You can come back with all these really cool ideas, and it's like, That's a beautiful dance. By the way, I'm 5 years. I can't dance that way, right? So it's just not going to work. So thinking about how we can bring design thinking into the process. A number of you are in classes where you have interdisciplinary teams. That is a critical piece of this structure. So it's a cool way to learn, so enjoy. But that's not the real point. The real point is this can't happen if you don't create cross-department interdisciplinary teams inside the enterprise that you work in. And it's not enterprises are siloed, and departments tend to want to stay within their departments. And making it work across departments is not easy, but you have to bring that skill back into your world because it's critical. From fire and forget to monitor and maintain, this issue of it's the customer's problem, no, it's our problem. And so this is predictive analytics. This is the noise to signal. This is detecting the signal, pulling the signal out of the noise, and then interpreting the signal. And then you have things like propensity to buy, mean time to failure. Where are we in terms of optimizing any large system? Really, and there's a lot of trapped value here in not detecting problems early enough to make them easy to solve. The earlier you detect a bug, the cheaper it is to solve that kind of problem. The earlier you detect propensity for a machine to go down, the less you can actually maintain it and not bring down the entire factory, those kinds of things. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for that. And it means that you design products differently. Whereas before we design them for their impact in the moment, which you still got to do, so they still have to have impact in the moment, but you also got to design them to phone home, and then you have to design home, because if you have a person at the other end, they're often doing something else. So you have to start. So all of a sudden, your systems thinking has got to go from just product-centric to system-centric, okay? And that's a big deal. From license and maintenance to subscription and usage, consumption economics. So it's obvious in consumers. It's obvious in media, it's obvious in games. But increasingly, as people are saying, look, it's not, the subscription and usage model does encourage you to say, I need to continually reinforce the relationship with the user. Which, in my generation, a computer was something to fear. And by the way, it never helped you. And by the way, if there was an error, it was a user error, right? User error. It's a kind of a warm message. User error, 2946. So now we're saying no. No, we can't do that because the user will kick us out. So now all of a sudden we got to play the consumption economics is forcing us, and it's putting a lot of power into people who are more and more conserved, less and less technological. So as more and more non-technical people are incorporated into our systems, they have voting power, right? And think about it. And so therefore, and we didn't court them. In the first 20 years of tech, if you didn't get tech, talk to somebody who does, right? And by the way, that's your problem. Well, now it's no, it's our problem. We can't make the model work unless we engage them. So conservative, technologically conservative users have become a much more important constituency than they ever were before. From release and install to land and expand, this is really important. One of the characteristics of the 20th century model was you would send your product into a customer environment. They would modify it or adapt it or localize it to work with their systems, which meant no two installations were ever the same, ever. Which means quality now, we used to say software begins to rot the day it's installed. Because it's now going down all these separate paths. You can't predict all the local interactions, and eventually some local interaction will create a problem, which you will go to solve, but it won't scale. It's a mess. So what the multi-tenant software as a service model did was it said, no, you don't install the software. And by the way, you have the same software as everybody else does. That's good or bad news, depending on how you feel about it. Here's the great news. The old model, if I sold you release 7 of Oracle, you grudgingly spent 2 years implementing it. And I came out with release 8. And the one thing you knew for sure was you would never release You've never used release 8 ever. And with release 9, hopefully not. And release 10, oh crap, I guess I have to, okay? But meanwhile, every year you paid maintenance for the privilege of not using my R&D. It's a horrible, horrible, horrible model. In the software as a service model, you pay it as you go, but if I release it on Friday, you got it on Monday, right? So all of a sudden, the release model is holding technology hostage. And this model released that. Now understand, you can't just extrude. The concept of release is not the same thing as export. You can't shove features into the customer's environment, but now at least they're staged to be adopted, and you can maintain quality because it's a multi-tenant apartment building, meaning every apartment's like every other apartment in the sense I can maintain. And then there is a metadata layer, which is specific to every customer, but it's architected above the core product. And this means you can now talk about what they're calling product-led growth as opposed to sales-led growth. And product-led growth simply says the product exposes the opportunities. We've seen it in games very early on, right? But you can now see it in any form of software. You say, look, here's a new feature we have. By the way, try it for free. If you like it, click here, boom, boom, we go forward. Brian and I were being driven by an Uber driver this morning who has a Tesla 3. They have a self-driving option. So he tried it out. He said, $200 a month. He said, okay, I'm going to try it. They had his account. Click, click, click. 30 seconds later, he has a self-driving car. Now, a couple of weeks later, he stopped his self-driving car. He thought, well, not quite ready for it again. But okay, your subscription expires at the end of this month. You're done. That's product-led growth. It's not some salesman will call. It's not we ran a marketing campaign. The product exposed it. So you have to think about your product is almost like an ambassador to the customer. So it's a very different, it's not just the internal functioning now, we're talking about the external function. And then the final one, from product support to customer success. And this notion of, look, this technology is very, it's intimidating, it's confusing, it's just complicated, there's all these dimensions. People need help with it. And so the notion is, if you can establish a role, an interaction with a customer, this particularly works with B2B. Consumer, consumer trusted advisor has to be some sort of federated community. There's a support community. You go on YouTube, they tell you how to do whatever you want to do. That's how it works in the consumer community. But in an enterprise world, public sector or private sector, it's actually a person. And it's a person who is trying to connect your vision and values to what this product actually is doing and to strengthen that connection. So all of a sudden you need humanities to connect with a customer and you need engineering to connect with the product, which is why you're all in the room, right? Why CMU is doing what it's doing. Because it used to be liberal arts colleges and engineering colleges were great as long as they were like in separate cities, right? Separate campuses. They should never intermarry, right? And it's like, no. We've got to make this thing work end to end. So those are some of the ideas. I'd love to, I'm going to actually stop now. We'll want to go to Q&A, but here's my question for you. As you were listening to this, thinking about it, it's like, what's one place where you went, I don't know. My crack detector went off. I don't know. I'm not sure that that's right. So I think we'd love to push it down. By the way, Brian's got a great crack detector, so I think I'll probably let him go first. Maybe I'll sit down. So anyway, thank you very much. I enjoyed that.
Everybody in the room, if you could pass your note cards with questions to this side, I'll collect them at the front as Geoffrey and Brian are talking.
Yeah, so Jeff, welcome to Carnegie Mellon again, and thrilled to have you here. Thanks for taking the time to come all the way from the West Coast. And I've had a collaborative relationship with you for 25 years that's so informed my own work. I think crossing the chasm and escape velocity inside the tornado is sort of foundational to how I think about the world of tech. So thanks for all you've done for the industry and for me. Your provocation here about the implications for product management is really important. We're in a room full of aspiring product managers from different disciplines. And I think if you think about that back to front to back, And you also, I want to tie that together with customer success, which is the world of adoption and usage. Great. But I think the next frontier is sort of value realization. That is, how do we know just because I'm using something in a B2B setting or even in a B2C setting doesn't necessarily mean it's delivering the value that, hey, ultimately I bought, right? So maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of the value realization movement constructs as it relates to sort of product management in the future.
So the thing about value realization is in a consumer world, the user and the customer and the person whose values we're trying to realize, it's just one person, right? It's all one. In a business or in a public sector or private sector enterprise, I may have bought software to accomplish some business objective or social objective. And the user is using the software. Now the user will give me good feedback about, is it making me more productive? Do I like using it? Can I do my job better? I will get very good feedback on that. But that's not necessarily value realization. Value realization is, did I change my behavior? Did I change my impact? Is my organization having a different impact on the world? That often the user doesn't see that, and sometimes they might not even want to see it. They might want to just stay in their own world. So what it requires with customer success, this is very interesting. Customer Success 1.0 was just about users. And by the way, it's been terrific. There's a company called Gainsight, great company, Meta, great guys. I really enjoyed working with those guys. They did the user thing, nailed it. I mean, other people are going to do it too. It's all good. We still don't have a system for the next one up because the next one up requires still a human, very much of a human in the loop, in a dialogue with the economic buyer, not the end user. The executive who says, I'm going to allocate budget to buy these products in order to have this impact on our business and our customers. It's easy for that to get lost in the usage model. And so as a product manager, again, finding that way, the product manager, we're not going to ask you to be almost like a general manager. You have to step up another layer and say, I need to have that second dialogue.
Yeah, excellent. Brad, we good with a question?
Yeah, we have a few.
Well, let's just
We have quite a few.
Let's go. Let's see if we go lightning round.
I'll go with some that pertain directly to your presentation first. One question that was submitted online is, can you explain the difference in your chart with the early 2000s and the past decade? You had a difference between consumer and customer focus. Can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, with the consumer, yeah, the customer in the 90s, it was the customer meaning, and in customer, I really meant the enterprise customer, which is both the economic buyer and the end user and the technical community. It's kind of like it's a many-headed beast. In the consumer world, it's that single person. And it makes a big difference because in the consumer world, the buying decision is much easier to do, and the support decision is much easier to do, as we just discussed.
Okay, and this is an interesting one, maybe in reference to your challenge to question the presentation. The question is, does a subscription model give the illusion of crossing the chasm?
Excellent one. Yeah, yes, unfortunately, that illusion will be revealed in quarter number 6. So yeah, you have to be able. This is why it's important to have in customer success. I talk about customer health score. You're looking for leading indicators of attrition, leading indicators of defection, or leading indicators of increased adoption going forward. You want to have a score that's about 130%. At 100%, you're actually, even though it looks like you're even, you're actually losing ground.
Now, you talked about the importance of evolving toward design thinking. How do you have advice or tips or techniques as to how to influence stakeholders that are stuck in the old way?
Yeah, yes. I think you need to get them to participate. The old design model was, I'm the designer and you're not. So this is a beautiful bed, and the fact that it's uncomfortable is your problem, right? Because it's a beautiful bed and that was my job. In the new world, it's like, no, I want you to sleep well. So all of a sudden, you need to bring the conservative, resistant population into the dialogue. You need to own their resistance in order to overcome their resistance, as opposed to repudiating or demonizing their resistance, which is, we see a lot of that. And we see that in our culture. We're doing a lot of demonizing in our culture right now. It's very destructive. you need to actually own the resistance in order to overcome it. And I think design thinking is a technique. All those are techniques for essentially detecting their signal. Because the problem is when you have somebody resisting you, you actually experience that as noise. You don't experience it as signal, but you have to experience it as signal. And so learn, and if you can't, you need to have somebody in the room who can. By the way, none of us can do all of this by ourselves. Play to your strengths, partner to your weaknesses. Don't try to be everything to everything, but make sure that the team does have everything.
We're going to go a little bit deeper now. We discussed this morning a bit, and it's also related to your new book. How do you draw the line or determine what is ethical in dealing with customers, especially as you're using AI?
Yeah, that is a big forward-looking one. So first of all, I think you need to decide you need to understand your own vision and your own values, and sometimes we call it our own true north. What impact are we trying to have on society? By the way, in my father's generation, nobody ever asked that question. It's like you just get a job and hold on to a job, and then there was a whole bunch of people like, well, get into a startup and make a lot of money, okay? And now we're saying, no, hang on. There's a planet here that, by the way, is deteriorating. And we have a lot of stuff we would like to work on here, so it's around impact. So the first thing you do is really get clear on your vision and your values, because ethics are local. There's not like one ethics for the world. So you have to, what are our ethics? Then I think you start looking at what AI is doing. And of course, AI is it's like atomic energy. It has this incredible capability for doing great stuff. There's this incredible capability for doing horrible stuff. The genie is out of the bottle, and we have not mastered the genie. We do not know how to do this. And we're going to try to do some things with regulatory control. They're going to suck. Regulatory control is just it's a hammer. It's not subtle enough for handling the problem. But you guys are. So you guys have to figure out intuitive, and you're going to experiment. You're going to make mistakes at the boundary, but you're going to correct the mistakes at the boundary. And as long as your vision and values, as long as human beings have vision and values, then I think we're going to have to continually course correct AI as we go forward. Understanding that there are malicious people who will be doing absolutely the opposite. They will be doing everything to make it as destructive as they possibly can. And so there's going to be a whole bunch of enterprises, mostly in the public sector, but cybersecurity everywhere, where it's like, guys, we need help against the bad guys. They're seriously bad guys, and they're very bad. And we need to put some of our best minds on it. It's a sad thing because you'd like to be working mostly for the good, but it is what it is.
This is Pittsburgh, so of course we have a lot of EV questions. As it relates to EV and any other industries, what industries do you see crossing the chasm next, and what obstacles do you see remaining for electric?
Well, let's do EV as an example, because this is a great example of EV crossed the chasm in Palo Alto. I mean, it was like Tesla's like everywhere. It's like the Palo Alto Prius. I mean, it was like, but seriously, when you cross the chasm, you have to have the whole product. So one of the things that Elon did early on was these charging stations down Highway 5 that began to say, what would this look like going forward? The reason you know it's crossed the chasm now is GM's committed to it, Ford's committed to it, Mercedes committed to it, Porsche's committed to it, Volkswagen's committed to it, Fiat's committed to it. So it's like, okay, now they're committed to it in X number of years, but they're building the factories now. So it's not like climate change where we're committed to be carbon neutral by 2030, because I'm hoping I won't have my job in 2030, and it'll be your problem. So that'd be the difference.
Jeff, we're going to round up our time. And the thought I had was, in a room of aspiring product managers, what would be your key piece of advice as they launch their careers in PM? What do you think is a key principle, a key idea that might really be important for them to be kind of intentional about?
I think if you, I mean, obviously you want to get whatever job you get, it's tense, but in an ideal world, I think you've got to align your profession with your values, and because it's going to go for a while. And so part of that is during the interview, do I like the person I'm interviewing with? I mean, ask them about their vision and values, like, and because I think that is probably the single most important variable. I hope you gotta like the category. You gotta at least be intellectually curious about the category you're going to be managing because it's going to change. You're going to care a lot. I think you have to be humble about the fact that people of one age generation tend to be skeptical of each other, but young people tend to be skeptical of old people, vice versa. You're going to want to have more impact than you're going to initially be able to be granted. But I think you still got to play for but I'm going, and if you can use data, if you can detect signal from the noise and use that signal as your power, as opposed to, I'm the product manager. It's like, no, look at the data and look at the signal. It just makes sense for us. And then try to engage people in the product adoption inside your enterprise. Getting their commitment to it is the deal. By the way, product manager is the roadmap to CEO. It just is. Because you are effectively the general manager. Okay, I'm getting the hook. Guys, I have to catch a plane to go see my grandson, who's actually more important to me than all of you combined. I apologize for that. But I enjoyed having a chance to at least chat with you briefly. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you coming. My class can follow me back to my classroom here. Oh, yeah, I teach principles of product management too in the MSPM program.
And is that one?
It's a mini in every fall. So 5 and 7.